All right, want to open this meeting of February 1st, 2018. If we can start by standing and doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thanks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let's go through introductions. I'd like to start.
Peter White, Nottingham.
Tony Dumas, Select Board.
Michael Keister.
Mishka Haddock, Chair.
Erin Masqua.
Jen Byron.
Carrie Lee.
And with us from the town, we have Chris.
Chris Stern,
And from the fire department?
Jake Wilczek, Fire Chief.
Thank you.
I'm just Sandy.
You're just, okay. All right, moral support, that's great. All right, let's get right into the second draft of the town budget and review the fire department. So if you'd like to come on up.
Good evening again. Jay Wilczek, Chief Nottingham Fire Rescue. Sorry I couldn't make it last week, folks.
That's quite all right.
Line by line, we'll go over the highlights here, okay? We'll start with our full-time salary, a minor change there. We're at fully staffed with 3 full-time employees right now. Part-time salary, showing a 10% increase for part-time, increasing the rate from $12 to $13. It becomes an hour. Part-time wages are paid for people who cover open shifts when the full-time staff is either at training, on vacation, out sick, that sort of thing. It becomes increasingly difficult to fill those shifts, those 10-hour shifts a day. We like to keep 2 licenses on during the week, during those daytime hours. So that's where that salary goes. It covers qualified people. It's open for whoever contacts us first that's qualified. Okay, there is a hierarchy. It's filled with firefighter EMTs first, and then goes down to an EMT next, or a firefighter. That's the way the shifts are filled. That's that change. Call member, 11%, I'm showing 11% increase, requesting the stipend, increase it to $40,000 amount. When I became chief, it was $30,000 about 12 years ago. It was increased by the board one time, and then from the chief, and then recently from the floor at the town meeting. Call volume, I'm going to talk about call volume. It's becoming increasingly difficult to staff anytime, okay? We're in this period of time when I don't know if money is the right incentive to get people to come out. We have significant turnover from time to time. The training requirements, everybody, you talk about the training requirements are to become a firefighter and stuff, and EMT, and the research requirements are quite extensive, so it takes a big draw on the people. I'll talk about call volume. We ended up last year, I believe, 449 calls, 460 the year before. December was a 47 call month, which is pretty high for us. We usually average about a call a day. We just got through the month of January, and we're up in the 55 to 60 calls in the month of January. And for whatever reason, we're in this series of back-to-back calls or simultaneous calls, which puts a drain in. So. And it happens. It's happening in the entire Seacoast area or whatever. It's just that the tempo has increased. So I've requested an increase in the stipend here to pay the points here to pay the call members to try to incentivize it. See if we can get some more support out of the members, that sort of stuff. Last year we picked up approximately 6 new people. Firefighters and EMTs, and they're still going through the training portion of it. So we still have some probationary members on right now. So
How long will the probationary period last?
It lasts anywhere from 6 months to a year until you're certified. Some of the folks that came in, we had two gentlemen that came in that were already certified at different levels of firefighting. One was former Army, military, got his training through the Army, which was through reciprocity with the state, was accepted, obviously. It's pro board certified. And the other gentleman came in with certs from Dover High School. Actually, Dover High School puts on a program. He was certified Fire 1. For those folks, their probationary period should not exceed more than 6 months because they already have the certs. For the other folks, it's up to a year whenever they can get in a class and complete a class. For the EMT, it may be, it's a year also. There's a probationary period. In addition to becoming certified, there's a probationary manual, there's a mentorship there's a mentor that's assigned to the people. There's a manual similar to a military type qual card approach where they become familiar with our equipment, they become familiar with our protocols, our operating procedures, and their witness signed off, and then when they're done, it goes up the chain to get signed off, so there's a record that they've received that training or that experience. And it's quite an extensive manual. I don't know how many pages. It was revised recently. It's at least a dozen pages long with signed checkoffs and things like that. So there is sort of a formal probationary. It's also meant to standardize it also, so that everybody comes in and gets the same exposure and gets the same download as far as the way we operate. So we use that approach.
Clarify the stipend thing, if you haven't seen this before, the stipend is a pool of money that's divided amongst the on-call members based on their participation. So they earn points for coming to calls, going to trainings, going all these things, and at the end of the year, they proportionally divvy up that pool. It's different than an hourly wage, which we pay those shift people for. That's that line above on the part-time line. That's the distinction. Sometimes it's the same people, where an on-call member will be in the station all day, just there to cover and work during the day, but they're getting paid as an hourly, on an hourly basis when we don't have the career coverage.
Gotcha.
Sometimes it's the same people, but they're paid kind of out of two different pockets, depending on what they're working.
The difference is when you're working a per diem shift, you're there all day. You're not going home. You're not on call. You're there all day. You're working the full shift.
Right.
That's what the difference is. That other pool, probationary members and a chief are not subject to points. I don't get points for responding to calls, and probation, until they're complete with probation, they don't get points either, so. Okay. Dues, 20% decrease in dues, because there will not be any dues from the Interstate Emergency Unit. That was a mutual aid organization for the Seacoast area. It's out of business. Seacoast Chiefs is the only mutual aid organization for the departments in the area, so there will be a savings of $150. Okay, training, 100% increase in training. Increased it from 5,000, requesting 10,000 this year, and that goes along with the training line covers the recertification of the current EMS personnel, the testing fees, the licensing fees, the recertification training. Every 2 years you have to have an RTP, you have to go through a formal training period. It covers the initial training for anyone in an EMT class. An EMT class runs anywhere around $1,000 to $1,500 depending on where you take the class, okay, plus the testing. Firefighter 1 classes run around $600 to $800 for a Firefighter 1 class. So any new member, most new members come in, we pay for the training. In order to soften some of that impact, we pay up front for these folks, because $1,000 plus is kind of a heavy economic burden for somebody to be, So times have changed, that's for sure. So we formalized our EMS training is also conducted by, we have an instructor that we contract, that a paramedic that has a training company that comes in and does our EMS training. We contract with him. for 11 classes once a month. He comes in once a month and trains. Okay, so that's part of that budget also. Okay. Vehicle maintenance, 7% increase, an increase of $1,000. There's some maintenance that's gonna be required to be done on engine 3 before the next inspection period. There's some pump work that needs to be completed after last year's pump test. Not enough to have it decertified, but enough that it needs to get corrected before we have it inspected again next year. That's where that comes from. Big item is under hydrant maintenance, showing a $15,000 increase, 750% if we want to do percents. The McCrillis Road hydrant failed sometime over last winter when we did our hydrant testing in spring. It was around March, April. We found that the pipe was damaged somewhere below the water line. You could see when you back flush it, you could see the churn in the water from where it was. It's not something that's above the water line that we could dig up or change before. It's a plastic hydrant. It wasn't installed on my watch. I've been chief for 12 years. It's been there as long as I've been in the department, I think. I've repaired it myself one time. It's usually subject, if you take a look at the location, it's subject to damage in the wintertime from plowing or whatever. It's just a poor design right there. We're looking at replacing it with an iron hydrant. I don't recommend installing plastic anymore. Since I've been chief, the Deerfield Road hydrant, which was relatively new, failed. That was plastic. We put iron in there. The Smoke Street hydrant, which was relatively new, had to be repaired. That was a plastic hydrant. McCrillis had failed one time prior to that. The hydrant at the school failed where it transitioned from iron to plastic fall in the winter time. Remember it had to be dug up and replaced also. So I don't recommend putting plastic pipe. The cost savings was about 50% for the material. When I did the original analysis, it was 50% cheaper to put plastic in than iron, but iron seems to last a long time. I can't predict what the lifespan of it's gonna be, but, I've been on the department 30 years, and the one here out in the ball field, that's been there a long time. I don't know when it was installed. I don't know if I can find records when it's been there a long time. Same thing, the one down at Bascom's Pond, that's an iron one. They're probably subject to alkalinity and things like that in the ground, for, exfoliating the metal, the kind of thing, but, they last longer than plastic. Plastic isn't the way to go. So that hydrant's been out of service all year right now, and it needs to be replaced, and that's where it comes from.
Are you considering relocating it due to its current location being not ideal, or?
Somewhere in that same ramp, whatever the contractor recommends, but we'd still use that same apron because of the way that it's a tight area with the
Best turns there?
yeah, and the guardrail kind of stuff. We're not looking at trying to change the flow of traffic. I think we went to a metal, the iron type pipe, that was surrounded a little better with, some more support. This pipe is exposed probably 8 feet down to the water line from, it's exposed right there. I think we would gain that way. Location, same general location, whether or not it's somewhere else on that apron, we could, discuss that with the contractor, whoever it turns out to be, so. Okay. All right, that's the major items on the fire department end, showing the number I'm showing out here is a 10% increase overall. Does that agree right there, for 10% increase overall in the requested fire department budget?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if you were to take out that fire hydrant, it would actually only be a 4% increase. So in a way, your capital improvement there is pumped it up a little bit. How often, or do you think we'll have one of these once a year, or every few years?
Well, right now, we're weeding out the plastic ones, that's for sure. I see the metal ones seem to last a lot longer. Smoke Street, we had some issues with it, that was repaired. They haven't been failing once a year, they've been failing maybe once every 3 years or so, we've been, experiencing a failure on the plastic ones. I'm trying to think where else we have plastic hydrants. We don't. Okay, so we're almost out of that business, so.
Are you looking at replacing any preemptively?
The only other one we have there is the Smoke Street one again that we could look at. Other than that, I think we're out of the plastic. Okay, so this isn't cisterns. These are dry hydrants. Okay, these are dry hydrants. Okay. School is metal. I'm running through all of them again. Community center is metal. Bascom's is metal.
Sophia's metal.
Sophia. So Sophia's are cisterns.
Oh,
Okay.
that's right.
Yeah, they're all cisterns, and all the cisterns come in with metal. Other than that, dry hydrant is the only one on Smoke Street. Kennard is a metal one. On Kennard Road, there's a metal one.
Is there one on 156?
By the school. Yeah, this one here
Only
is,
down.
Towards
No,
Raymond.
towards Raymond.
that's a cistern.
What's a cistern?
Cistern
It's
is
a
a
tank.
storage tank. It holds
Oh, that's a tank.
30,000, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. These are, they're dry hydrants. They're not pressurized. All it is the pipe goes out onto.
And pulls water.
Right, exactly. Below the ice and still get water, so.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
You mentioned cisterns. Where are we at with those? I think there was, what is their lifespan, and is there a plan, like, are they included in the CIP in order to get some funds to maintain those, or?
They're not included in the CIP by design. If I think we look at the plan, they're designed for like a 30-year lifespan. All except 2 of them are fiberglass, composite type tanks. We have 2 that are cement. Other than standard, the only thing is in my operating budget is standard maintenance, just regular maintenance. I don't have anything in the CIP to replace them. I think that's, I don't know what we're gonna do to predict that right now, as far as the failures go, okay? What we experience for failures now are basically sign damage, external kind of things like that.
So, but the tanks are all in good shape and should last us a number of years.
Correct, we're not seeing any weepage or leakage, and that would be another, the issue would be probably close to replacing the entire tank, that's for sure, okay? No, there's nothing in the CIP for maintenance of them,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, I just think that I don't know what one of those costs and what it costs to replace them. I mean, I guess it's, a hole in the ground and you drop the tank in, but, should they come to, close to their end of life cycle or whatever, we should consider trying to level fund that in some way or another.
Okay,
So,
something to predict in the CIP.
all right.
Professionally, I'm not in favor of a lot of cisterns in town, because we inherit the, like you said, the maintenance cost and the risk afterwards.
Right.
Recommend, there's other ways, if possible, to address that fire protection. If there's a natural source with a dry hydrant, that's one of the, the additions. The other that we can't enforce is if the house is sprinklered, the town is not responsible for the maintenance of it, so.
Right.
Something to discuss offline or in the future, okay?
All right.
Okay. Ambulance, separate budget line, the .20 budget line. This entire line comes out of the ambulance billing special revenue fund. So
Medical supplies?
everything here, everything on this line comes out.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so anything that's not expended goes back into that fund, okay? So these are estimates that, are based on just managing those funds for the last, we've been doing this probably about 10 years or so, we've been pulling the funds out. We've managed to expand it, in different areas. When the fund was established, it was to replace the ambulance. Looking at the balances, we were able to, replace the ambulance and expand its use to cover the operating expenses, just about all the operating expenses for the ambulance, with the exception of wages. We're not paying for the manpower, okay? We expanded it last year to include training. There's a small $2,000 we pulled out of there. Last year, we had a real, we had a run on training funds. So we were able to cover some of that using this fund right here. So, you know, everything on here is based on experience. Any of the changes are based on what the actuals were over the last 2 years or so. Any questions on any of the any changes? You know, line by line, you know, service contracts based on what the actuals are. Billing services, you know, this is an average of what we pay. We pay 7% on collected amounts to a private company to handle our billing for the ambulance transports. ALS services, there's a slight reduction, and again, that was based on, you know, looking at, when we have a paramedic intercept from Exeter Hospital or any of neighboring organizations like McGregor or Epsom or Concord, they typically bill the department for that transport, okay? We bill the patient for it, and this covers, you know, the time frame in between when we receive the bill from the paramedic organization to we receive the money for that, okay? There's a slight reduction there. Right now, as of today's roster, we do have 2 paramedics on our department. So whenever they transport, that's, the town is getting the benefit of that billing. It's not going out to another organization, so. Medical supplies, it's based on what our actuals are for our annual medical supplies. I can't, you know, that varies based on call volume. So training started last year. Fuel, reduction in fuel costs there. Slight rate. Okay. Vehicle maintenance, reduction in vehicle maintenance. We just got a new ambulance put in service in December, so I'm not anticipating any major maintenance costs. So we reduced that. Vehicle line is blank because we just replaced the ambulance in December of 17. Telephone, a reduction, and that's based on what the actuals are. Okay. Overpayment line, sometimes insurance companies, Medicare or whatever, go back and they audit what they paid, and they come back and say, we've overpaid, you need to pay us back. So that's where the overpayment line is. Sometimes the original billing is incorrect, so it's mostly from like Medicare. Any questions on the ambulance line?
Do you know off the top of your head about what the fund balance is in the ambulance fund? Or does it pretty much break even?
No,
It's more than break even, okay?
100 left after the purchase?
I believe so.
Ish.
And that would go to a new, is that kind of sit in reserve for a new ambulance when that's needed?
And again,
over 100.
yeah. We just pull out 225,000 in December to pay for the new ambulance and the outfitting of it, so that's about what's left in it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
I think we average around 50K a year, about 50K a year.
It bounces around a
Yeah.
little bit.
And again, it depends on what the call volume is and the natures of the calls, okay?
Can I go back to the fire department budget for just a minute? Line 204, supplies and equipment, did you already address that? I'm seeing a significant difference between actuals and budgeted from last year.
Well, last year was kind of unique in the budget area because I was faced with a potential head gasket issue on the 2005 forestry. So I kind of backed off. I knew that there was a potential for a $6,000 to $8,000 expense that we had to cover. doing a head gasket on the forestry.
That would be under equipment maintenance, wouldn't it?
True, but I was looking for funds to cover that increased maintenance. I think this was an unplanned, catastrophic kind of failure that we were anticipating. This was diagnosed probably in the midsummer or so, and I was waiting to the end of the year to have it fixed to see where the number was. So we backed off on the supplies and the equipment purchases to be able to offset that cost, okay? What I normally would have purchased as far as maybe replacing a couple nozzles on a truck and or some more hose, I incrementally replaced. I didn't do that last year because I was anticipating a 6,000 to, actually it was like 6,000 to almost 10,000 depending on where you took the truck to get fixed for head gaskets on that Ford, okay? When it actually came down, it was the end of the calendar year, and we had it done in December. I took it to a Ford dealer, and the Ford dealer analyzed and says there is no problem with the head gasket. So there was a good, pleasant surprise, okay? It was misdiagnosed. And that's why there was a surplus in that line. There was some, I was trying to fence some of the funding there to be able to cover that shortfall, so we wouldn't have to come to town or the Board of Selectmen saying we're short $8,000 to keep a truck in service. You know, try to save it from that line, okay? But that's money that typically goes into buying additional equipment, replacing the equipment incrementally, so there's no surprises coming in and saying I buy $10,000 worth of new hose, or you know, thousands of dollars of new tools. We buy them incrementally out of that line, so it kind of held back on that.
Okay.
Okay, that's where that surplus shows. Okay. Okay. Warrant articles, SCBA's,
Warrant articles were, did everybody bring their last week's packet? Okay.
okay.
I don't know. We can do it from memory.
Okay, look.
Well, while you're looking, I think we can probably explain. Let's talk SCBA's first, since we're talking about,
We'll talk about capital reserve in here.
yeah, we have, traditionally, Jay has tried to maintain about $100,000 tax impact for vehicle and major equipment purchases. We have deposited about that much in the reserve fund each year and take it out periodically to buy a new piece of equipment. I don't know what you have in front of you, if you have a 75 and a 25,000 articles, or if you have a single $100,000 article. What are you looking at that? Do you have anything that?
I think it's a single 100, if I'm
Okay.
looking at the right thing
All right, so
from last time.
we're gonna propose changing the purpose of the fire vehicle reserve fund. We're gonna add a authorized use for those funds for breathing apparatus. We're gonna basically increase the burden on that fund to pay for our breathing apparatus replacements. And maintain that $100,000 tax impact. Rather than, because they all have to be replaced at about the same time, and I'll let the chief run through all that, but what we plan to propose to town meeting is to use that existing fund for more things, namely breathing apparatus. So that's how we're gonna go after that. And
Okay.
you can speak to the importance of the equipment.
Okay. Self-contained breathing apparatus, last time I brought a prop with me when I did it for the selectmen. We have 15 SCBA's with 30 bottles. The lifespan is 15 years. The SCBA's we have now were obtained in 2004. They were actually grant funded at that time. It was post 9/11. Grants were pretty easy to come by. As far as standards on SCBA's, I briefed the Board of Selectmen that every 5 years, the standard for SCBA's changes, hopefully for the better, better features and safety reasons right now. Ours are currently 2002 vintage, because that was the standard they were made to in 2004. They were updated in 2, 7, 12, 17 is the standard now that's going into production for 2018. Our packs, the last hydro on the bottles, per Department of Transportation regs, the composite bottles have to be hydro tested every 5 years, and you get 3 hydros on a bottle, and you have to change the bottles. 2019, early summer 2019, late spring, I think it's around June, I have to look at the tags on there, our bottles expire. So all our bottles need to be replaced also at that time. So we're looking at like a 15-year lifespan on this equipment. And instead of impacting the taxpayers and setting up another capital reserve just to put money in for a short period of time, we propose pulling out $100,000, or putting $100,000 in this year and putting $100,000 in the second year and pulling out what we need, which would be in the area of $150,000 to replace those SCBA's, okay? We're working with 3 different vendors, and vendors said that they can turn quickly, and if we place the order right after the town meeting, we'll have them before our bottles expire in June-ish, okay? That's not gonna be an issue. They're important, okay? They're not only used in fires, they're used in cleaning up, mop up, whatever after a fire. They're used for car fires, they're used for CO calls. If there's any tool, I explained that to the Board of Selectmen, if there's any tool, they could, probably the most used tool on a piece of fire apparatus is the breathing apparatus. Gets pulled off the seat most frequently, so. Without them, we're out of business, okay? It's not something we can deal without, so. And here's the other part. I do plan on pursuing grant opportunities for these replacements. I think we have the best opportunity of getting a grant again for SCBA's. We'll be pursuing the Assistance to Firefighter Grant. Vehicle is probably the most lucrative one for SCBA's for next year. You have to do it when you're gonna buy them, okay? Originally I was gonna say buy half 1 year, half the next year. Like I said, the standard changed in 2017. It actually goes into production now in 2018. When I was, interfacing with the vendors, they couldn't even, their salespeople couldn't predict what the cost or what they would look like. Because they hadn't decided, they can to some extent, they hadn't decided what was being included as a requirement for 2018. We're gonna wait till 2019, so that'll settle out a little more. We won't be getting the early production one, there'll already be a year in there, and we'll be able to keep the configuration the same instead of splitting it over 2 years. It's something I don't care if it's having 2 different, model years of SCBA's, they all should be the same.
Right.
'Cause that
Maintenance
has
also,
risks,
yeah.
okay, risks associated with it, so. Maybe they'll be minor, maybe there'll be none, but it's still, there's risk associated with that. So we could probably be better off by waiting and purchase them all in 1 year. That way it would be all the same. Too bad.
So you're pulling those funds from the vehicle reserve fund.
Correct.
What happens to your vehicle reserve fund for future?
Well, we go out, our next, assuming that we get approval to purchase in the 2018 town meeting, our next vehicle purchase would be in the 23 to 24 timeframe. So if we, we apply the $100,000 after that, it's gonna affect it, it's gonna kick the can down, we're gonna be $150,000 to $200,000 less in that fund, but, it's 5 or 6 years down the road here.
To build it
okay?
back up.
Exactly. The next vehicle after, let's be positive and say, okay, engine 3 goes away and we get a replacement this year. The next vehicle that would be due for replacement would be the tanker in 2023, 2024. The tanker, we probably could delay a year or so, because it's not a pumper, it's not an engine. You know, use-wise also, we could be smart on where we replace the tanker, okay?
Great.
It's, you know, it's more imperative that we take care of our 23-year-old piece this year. We need to take care of that one, okay? That's,
All right. Anybody have any questions? Concerns? Looks good. Thank you for all that you guys do.
thank you. You're very welcome.
You wanna talk about the truck?
Yeah,
Okay.
Want you to wrap
Absolutely.
up with that.
All right.
yeah.
A different approach for town meeting this year with the truck. We're gonna request to be able to withdraw and expend up to, I think, 525 was the dollar amount. Okay, the balance of the capital reserve is 549, 540, it's more than 525.
Yeah.
Okay, it was 525 last year, the balance of the capital reserve fund. We're gonna come up with some basic, like a performance type spec presentation. We're not identifying what the truck is at this time. It's gonna be an engine. It's gonna be a larger capacity engine. We're looking at a minimum of 2,500 gallons of water to bring on this, similar to some of our neighboring towns, Stratford, Epping, and Lee. Run a larger capacity truck as their first new engine. We're gonna follow that model. It basically carries at least 1.5 times of what our first truck carries now in terms of water. Performance spec, it's gonna be a custom cab, it's gonna have a 1,500 gallon pump, gallon per minute pump. Some of the other, you know, the lighting, very a performance spec, not coming in and pitching one specific vendor, okay? We're looking for approval to be able to withdraw and expend that and have the Board of Selectmen act as the agents to approve who the vendor is. Once we get approval, then, you know, we'll go with the spec review from the vendors, and the fire department will make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen on which vendor to select, based on still those same performance characteristics that we talked about. You know, it's a custom cab, X amount of gallons, 1,500 gallons per minute pumper, and we'll work within that range.
You said it's gonna have a holding tank, it's not a tanker, it's a.
No, it's an engine, it's an engine, it's gonna be a pumper engine, and that's what we're gonna run it as a pumper engine, but its capacity is gonna be equal to a tanker, okay?
So does it, I missed something.
No.
Did you say at the beginning it's gonna hold?
2,500 gallons of water. Our current engines carry 1,000, our two engines,
Okay, so all the engines do.
and our tanker carries 2,500. You see where I'm going? We're gonna have an engine that has the capacity of our tanker, okay?
Okay.
That's what we're looking at, okay? We're looking at increasing our water capacity on our first new piece, where we'd have to roll the tanker afterwards, okay? So that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
And, you know, we can get into the debates on size-wise, it's not gonna be larger than our tanker. It's gonna fit anywhere our trucks fit now, so.
Now, is this the same truck we talked about at town meeting last year? I seem to remember there was a discussion.
2 years ago, we talked about a Quint, and that was an aerial device, and this is not a Quint. I'll be upfront with the people in the town or whatever, okay? I live here, I lived here for 30-some years, I plan on dying in this town, I'm not trying to pull anything over anybody's eyes. Next truck we come for may be a Quint, and this truck may posture us better to be able to supply that Quint, okay? So, in the meantime, it makes more sense. Again, I talked about the Quint being a force multiplier. The large engine is a force multiplier, where I'm saying that the two people that are on duty roll that as first due. We're bringing 2,500 gallons of water to that incident, where before we were bringing 1,000 and relying on another truck to bring the rest of the water. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at trying to, you know, increase our capabilities in that way.
Is it safe to say that comparing to a Quint, you're trading that water capacity for the aerial capacity that you would have had with the Quint?
That's true.
Okay.
That's
So
true.
that's what's different in what
Yeah.
they proposed
No
for
ladder.
last time.
Yep. And the Quint had a reduced water capacity, so we're gonna offset that by having our first due. That's the long-term plan, okay? Long-term plan, okay? Insurance inquiries always ask about how much water you're gonna bring to the fight. They don't ask about anything else. They really wanna know how much water you're gonna bring, okay? You're gonna bring, so this helps in that area also. Sir?
What, in a typical large structure fire, that you would envision deploying this to. How much water in the whole mission would you anticipate using?
A save or a total loss, sir? Okay,
The most you're gonna
well,
pump out in a large structure fire?
a large structure fire, I can tell you right now from recent experiences with structure fires, it's gonna be in the tens of thousands range, okay? That's a total loss, okay? You're not gonna do it yourself, you're gonna have a tanker shuttle. If it's gonna be a save, it's usually, if you can't save it with 1,000 gallons, okay, there's a problem there, okay? That means that, you know, it's pretty well involved, okay? So, yeah, when you're finally done, and if it's a total loss, we're talking in the tens of thousands of gallons of water that it's not being used, okay? So, it's still gonna rely on mutual aid, it's still gonna rely on a tanker shuttle, and it's gonna rely on more than, but it brings more for the initial attack, okay? So,
It's the first 2,000 that matter the most,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but typically a room of
Yeah, I think
contents.
on that fire over on Revolutionary,
Yep,
there's a 30,000 gallon cistern outside my house that was empty.
empty.
And they brought in a bunch of trucks.
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
What was that sentence you were just gonna say? A single room?
Yeah, room and contents fire, 1,000 gallons is gonna, you know, for a save, easily, you know, that's, if you can't knock it down with 1,000 gallons, there's a problem, okay? That's, okay, the first, okay? So.
I had a question. Say we had a fire here in the town hall in the section that was, we still have asbestos
Yeah.
here. Would your department be able to handle something like that? And say, oh, that's asbestos was burning, and how would you?
The asbestos, yes, okay, that's probably the least of, yeah. It's more of an inhalation hazard, right, with the asbestos than it is about the fire hazard, because asbestos is kind of like a fireproof kind of material. So, yeah, with SCBA's, it shouldn't be any different than any other hazardous environment for breathing, okay?
So that's why you need the new apparatus, or?
SCBA would be required, like any fire, so, there's asbestos in, you know, old homes and things right now, so, and there's a lot of toxic gases even in the new houses. That's one of the things about the way the houses are being built with engineered materials, the toxic gases are, you know, SCBA is required, so.
I believe it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all the laminate flooring and all that stuff's just filled with glues and chemicals and.
It's changed the curve for, you know, fire behavior where, you know, and I don't want to get into that right now, but as far as like where the flashover is, where you're fully involved, where, you know, from the incipient stage to the fully involved stage to the decay stage, it's changed because the materials have changed. It's added a second peak sometimes. It's changed the time frame of it. Historically, you know, with older homes, I don't want this getting off track here, but you look at a time graph of a fire. By the time the fire department got there, it wouldn't have reached the point of having a flashover because of the materials that are in the houses right now. It's reaching that peak a lot sooner, and depending on how the house is constructed, if it's somewhat airtight even, there's a second peak because it gets star for air, and there'll be a second flashover later in the time frame. Okay, so it's changed the characteristics of the, you know, the fire curve, that's for sure.
All right.
I don't know what else is on there for capital, or, excuse me, warrant articles. We're good?
There's,
There's $100,000 deposit for capital reserve.
That's it.
yeah,
Fire vehicle, CRF.
Yeah.
fire vehicles here,
And then the
and
withdrawal
there's
for the ambulance fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so we're all clear on the ambulance fund, all the revenue from the ambulance goes into the revenue fund, the special revenue fund for the ambulance.
Yeah.
Every year, we need authorization to spend that. We can't just have a blanket authorization to spend it, so we see that article every year.
Stay relieved.
And it's, what is it used for as far as the authorization?
That's that second budget that
That's
the
the
chief
second-
went through, that's,
Okay.
yeah, that's what it's for.
All those different line items are covered. So it covers basically the entire cost of operating the ambulance short of manpower. Doesn't cover wages.
So I have a question then, why is the proposed budget half of what you actually expended? It's, unless I'm reading it wrong, it says,
I'm not sure that those expenses are paid correctly, because
it says current year expenditures 57,000?
right, that's what the column says, but I'm not positive that that total is correct. That's what you're asking. This,
Well, it says expenditures, and then it also says revenues, so balance remaining is negative 50,
so
it says negative 57,000.
right. Kind of tough stuff, right, I'll go look at it. So this $57,000 in revenues that you outlined, I'm not sure is correct. Betsy's going through those this afternoon.
Okay.
So that will be updated for next week. The balance remaining is just really zero. I'll go ahead and take that portion out of there.
No, but down the bottom there, the total expenditures is more representative of that 17.6,
Okay.
okay?
And I'm not sure those expenditures down at the bottom, so you have I just left the headers up at the top of the revenues and we carried them down. So I can do that as well for you guys.
Please, yeah,
So then
because this is
last
very,
number-
right now, it's very confusing. It looks like we're completely underfunding this thing, and
I'll fix it.
That hasn't happened. We've been operating within that 20-some thousand, no, that's what I was,
all right. Is there,
Actually, I got a question. Was it last week we met last, or the week before? Anyways, last time we met, we discussed the possibility of creating a reserve fund to replace the cisterns over the long term. Do you have the information on when they were constructed and what they were made of and maybe their expected lifespan? It might help with planning for that.
I have some information, the legacy stuff I can't vouch for, but I have some information, that's for sure. I can,
Get that to Chris
yes,
and
I
we'll
could put
plot
together
it
what I
out.
have, okay? Some of it's legacy, because systems have been going for years and years, and I don't have those files, I don't know where they are, so.
Are those like the old concrete ones?
There could be one concrete that's old legacy, there was one concrete that was installed on my watch, I know that. But we don't allow concrete anymore, so. We can probably come up with a time frame for most of them, okay? Whether or not it's, based on the files I have or based on
Right.
historical memory, okay?
Yeah.
See what we could do, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You want me for anything else?
Town updates is next. And
Yeah.
actually, there was,
Thank you.
there was, there was one question last week that I couldn't answer.
You just waited till now.
Yeah, no, I had it written down and I don't think I emailed you, but, our solar panels that we're
Yeah.
getting.
Oh, yeah.
There's that new 30% tax on imported panels. Does that affect us, or is our stuff bought?
Doesn't look like it, no. We are through permitting and ordering. I think we're waiting on inverters is the last piece of equipment that they're waiting on. So the tariff shouldn't affect us, is the latest word I've heard.
Excellent.
And that's not something they could hit us with retroactively, like 7 or 9 years down the road when we go to actually buy ownership of the.
No, because I think the tariff is closer to retail, it's at the point of purchase somewhere. I'm no
Right.
expert on that, but I really doubt it. then it could come back and bite us. Because by the time we buy it, it's used,
Right.
right? So that would seem very unlikely.
And we could always calculate an offsetting depreciation to.
Yeah, and we're contracted at a price, and that contract was entered long before the tariff business, so, I don't see that impacting us at all.
Of course, when the school gets into their solar panels, it may be an issue, but hopefully we'll have a different president by then. I'm talking a year from now, but go on.
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And, next
See you a
week,
week from today.
a week from today, so Tuesday, we have deliberative session with the school, at the school, and then on Thursday night, we have public hearing for the school budget, for the town budget, here in this room
Correct.
at 7 PM. We are going to do the minutes tonight, because I don't want to deal with them next week.
You may get your documents for next Thursday a little bit more piecemeal, simply because we're just gonna be, as they're completed, I'm gonna send them out. And that may mean like sending out the warrant articles to you, not numbered and not recommended by the selectmen, because they're gonna be next Monday, but at least you'll have some of that language ahead of time, so.
Yeah, we don't have, number-wise, we don't have any other big changes since the last time we went through the budget, so there won't be any surprises there. Revenues are very stable, so no surprises there. So it all should look very similar to what we've been talking about
Good.
all along.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. All right, did you have any other general town updates?
No, not much, just as far as road work goes, I think we're still waiting for some information to come back from the engineering firm that we've got looking at the stuff. So we haven't settled on a final number for that particular warrant article, but we should have that done fairly soon.
Yeah, frost heaves are a beast right now,
They are.
especially right there when you veer off onto 156.
Yeah,
and,
I just went
right-
that way tonight, it was like.
Yeah, they got the signs up now.
It's gonna be a rough spring, so, all right. Sue is not here, so no general school updates, at this point in time. We do have the big meeting on, Tuesday, so, we will plan on, taking care of that. Approval of minutes. The December 21st minutes, I think we took care of already last week, right?
You did,
So,
yeah,
okay.
I did a copy and paste and forgot to update the minutes, so
So-
it is just this one set from January 25.
I suspect that Thursday's meeting is going to be fairly lengthy with the public hearing of the
Town budget.
town budget. So let's get these,
Is there more public attendance at that one than there was for the
Yes.
school?
yes. Well, typically, it
Depends
depends
on
on the
what's in
year
there.
and it depends on what's being
Yes.
proposed. So the school had really nothing going on. When the school was doing when they were doing
Contracts, right.
teacher contracts and negotiations and stuff, then we had a room full. But at the town meeting, I suspect we will have quite a few people just because of this bond that's being proposed and stuff. So let's go through and take care of these minutes so we can get that out of the way and not have to deal with it next week.
Don, could we put some context on line 15 to ensure we're talking about the town moderator instead of perhaps a school moderator? But just indicate that it's town moderator would help that, thank you.
line 21, sort of halfway across there, company that is primarily caused by adjustments. Entity. Line 27 says Mr. White asked why the amounts, it should be amount, was so low.
Actually, line 17, we were talking about whether or not the moderator was getting an increase. She didn't decline to discuss it, she's just declined to ask for an increase.
Ask for an increase?
Right.
Line 61, 2016, and there are large purchases planned for the future. A pluralized purchase. And then line 63, all trucks should be included, pluralized trucks.
So add an S to purchases above on line 63.
Mm-hmm. On line 61, add the S to purchases, yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
trucks.
Oh, 60 on line 62.
Line-
Mr. White stated it didn't make sense to treat capital purchases different. Add an S there.
Oh, I see. I guess, sure. Then it should be differently, right?
Where?
If you're gonna say purchases, shouldn't it say differently?
Yep.
On line 88, Mr. Dumas stated, and then there's he is, those should be removed, I believe. Mr. Dumas stated the biggest
That's
concern
what
is,
he's concerned,
On page one, no, page 4, line 136, did you intend for, this is, Ms. Karen Marsh, introduce yourself as the newer librarian? Is that intentional?
Where's that?
Middle of the,
Oh,
middle of
new librarian.
136. Oh, we've had a couple, and one's still kind of new, but
and is she
she's newer.
She's the new
She's a
library
library
director.
director.
Thank you.
not
Yeah.
librarian, yeah.
Line 137 at the end, they didn't over expend, they increased.
What?
Second sentence, line 137.
Yeah.
The library increased their proposed budget in the areas of the alarm system and library cleaning. How that did overextend.
On line 140, Ms. Marsh explained the proposed library budget is an approximate 9% increase.
Thank you.
Line 175, Ms. Levison stated resignations, plural, continue to be received.
Registration.
Yep.
Line 185, Mr. Keister asks if additional student changes, perhaps we could change that to, or insert student high school decisions, decision changes, or selection changes.
Commitment.
Okay.
188, Pro-Brown is tuition driven and has no public funding mechanism.
Yep.
On line 190, the word increase, should that be cap? Nottingham has within the Dover contract a proposed rate cap?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes of January 25th, 2018 as amended?
So moved.
Second. Carried.
Carrie, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody? 6, 7. Thank you.
All right. Any other business that anyone has?
Yeah, you want to take a look at that CIP?
Yes.
I told you I copied it, sorry.
Yeah, we've got 2 pages that are equally significant. The totals at the bottom of this, the second page are the total for each of those years, 2018 through 2024. Keep in mind that those are the totals regardless of the the expenditure source. So, for example, it looks like 2018 is going to be a pretty heavy year with the 1705 exceeding any of the others in future years. 525 of that is an expenditure coming out of a capital reserve fund for the fire truck. So it's not like we're hitting the operating budget for each of these numbers in the total line. So just be aware of that when you're looking at that and saying, oh boy.
Does the total also include it looks like the annual contributions to the reserve
Yes, it does.
are kind of in the same direction as what might be taken out of the reserve, so is that a gross total, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of confusing
It
to me
is.
as I'm looking at this.
And it would probably be more useful if the total line was the total from the operating budget.
Yeah,
And in that case, the contributions to the capital reserve fund would be appropriations out of that year's taxes. But things spent out of an existing capital reserve fund, like the fire engine, really don't belong in that total, I don't think,
Yeah.
for the purpose of being able to compare year to year what the tax hit's gonna be.
yeah.
Well, the other thing is we have that 1-ton pickup, the 65,000 listed on the capital improvement CIP proposed, and we also have it in the operating budget, so it's appearing twice. That doesn't make sense. Should be in either one or the other.
We're,
Who's looking at this?
The highway
Okay.
department.
Well, it says operating budget, though.
But it's in the CIP totals, so it looks like it's part of that total from this.
Well, it's part of the
It's also in
improvement
this.
plan.
Huh?
It's part of the improvement plan.
Right, but it's also
This
part of
is-
the operating budget. See, the fire truck's not part of the operating budget, and neither should the pickup truck be. It's not something you buy every year, you budget for it, it's a
No, but-
capital improvement. It shouldn't be in both documents at the same time.
yeah, it should be. And the reason is what you're looking for in a capital improvement plan is some level, consistent year-to-year expenses, okay? And if you're including everything from the operating budget, that's appropriate because that's what hits your tax rate.
So the 525,000 for the fire truck should be in the operating budget then?
It isn't though.
No, of course not.
Because there's a dedicated reserve fund for it.
Right.
Right.
The
If
fund,
you
the
look at
funds,
Shimco
the funds
being
for the fire
member-
truck have already been appropriated. Whereas the funds for this particular pickup truck have not. That's why they're on, that's why,
But all the other vehicles have been, right? They're all,
Well, it depends on what it says in the funding source. Take a look at that and you can kind of sort out which of those.
so the 1-ton is
No, I
in the operating
understand.
budget.
That year.
But if
understand
you-
where it's coming from, yes, but, okay.
So if you look at the fire rescue, it says engine replacement, that money comes from the capital reserve fund from the fire department. And then if you look at the 1-ton pickup truck, that comes from the operating budget, which is why it's in the actual proposed budget. Whereas the engine replacement is in the capital reserve fund, so that money's already been set aside in previous years when they collected amounts in order to plan, because this was planned, this is not planned. The pickup truck is not planned.
That's why we have a CIP is to,
It's to try to avoid these kinds of situations,
Yes.
right? So,
I want to call your attention to a line on the second page there. Where is it? Okay, middle of the page in the school area, there's a modular classroom equivalent building. We had some discussion about whether it is possible that some of the monies for that $405 expense would be potentially coming from impact fees. And that's real iffy. Nobody's gonna commit to saying, yes, this, we can depend on impact fees for that, because there's some very tight constraints on how impact fees can be used.
They have to be able to demonstrate that the building, the purchase of the building, the increase in the space and resources is directly attributable to growth in the town. That's very hard to establish. You know, that's why they did the capacity study earlier this year. So,
and
It's a
they
tough
have
nut to crack.
But why else would you need the building?
Uh,
I mean, you're
Program.
looking for additional
Program.
Programming, yeah,
Or-
programming needs.
yeah.
So it would
Or
have to be
essentially
used as
needing
basic
it for-
classrooms and not as just an art center or something.
Right, or a full-day kindergarten
Right.
expansion. And we had quite a bit of discussion about, should be modular classrooms or equivalent building. There was, the school isn't sure that they're gonna use a modular classroom. They may have a stick-built classroom on its own slab as the equivalent space that is used for that purpose in the year that they finally build it. They're finding that there are cost estimates for a stick-built standalone building that are real comparable to what it would cost to bring in a module. So they wanted to make sure that there's, that we don't get locked into a modular or express it as locked into a modular.
Makes sense.
I was wondering, I recently went to basketball games at a couple other schools, and it looked like they had gymnasiums that were, I don't know how to explain, maybe a modular or maybe of a kit kind of program. If we were to take and convert our current gym into classrooms, something along those lines, but then use an addition or the modular space or something along the lines to build a gym, you know what I mean, use what we have existing in the school. I don't even know if I expressed that correctly, but,
I think yeah.
because if you go over to Epping and Sanborn, I think it's probably a better conversation for a night that Sue's here.
Or a school board meeting.
Yes, definitely more appropriate there.
Be some high ceilings
But
in
I-
those classrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be, but I'm just wondering, I don't know.
Put a second floor in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
Modular second floor maybe.
Get it
There
through
you
the
go.
doors.
Get some loft space up there, you know,
Have they
storage.
looked at where on the property they would put a modular or another equivalent building?
I'm not the one to ask.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that
I
discussion.
think I know in the past, when they were looking at doing the addition, they were looking at that, like, space behind the school, that horseshoe-shaped area.
Just behind the library.
The garden.
Yeah, they were basically, if you, when you walk in and you see the library, it's going straight out that wall.
I think at the time, they were looking at adding on to the school, and if I remember correctly, to attach anything new to the school would require them to bring the school up to code, which means gutting it, putting it in sprinklers, and that just shot the projection through the roof, so. That's when they started looking at modulars.
And then there's just fine points about if you have a sidewalk with a breezeway connecting the two structures, is that an improvement to your existing structure that would require the upgrade to the sprinkler system on that? In a residential setting, yes, it would. Well, not specifically for sprinklers, but building codes typically will call a breezeway to your garage an addition that would require upgrade to what other building codes issues that you have in the whole structure. May not be applicable to a school or a commercial building, I don't know. Beginning to-
It's interesting how that works, because then you can do, you know, then they have like different clauses as far as like, if you have an old building and you wanna rebuild it, basically, I think there used to, I don't know if it's still in place, but there used to be a law that you couldn't tear down the whole structure, so basically all you had to do was leave up one wall, and then you could rebuild the rest of it. But as long as one wall was original, then you could reuse everything else. It was just, so, anyway. I digress. There was talk about the glycol system. That was the school, right? That's part of that's not part of the roof air handlers gym cafe?
I don't think so. I think
Or the heat,
Or
the
clean
heating
air
system.
ducts?
it's a separate warrant article, I believe.
I'm just wondering if they have it set up so that if this is a recurring every, certain number of years, I think you had said, Carrie, off the top of your head, that you thought it might be like every 3 years they do something like that. But whatever the cycle is, I know it kind of hit them this year, and so are they planning for it?
I think that's just in the operating budget, is one of those periodic costs that they incur.
Yeah.
What was it, like 10 or 15,000 or something
Yeah.
like that? The school budget?
All right.
So like
See
three,
if you can plan those for years when you don't have a whole influx of high school kids.
yeah.
Are there any other questions about the CIP document?
I know
This
the
is-
city has struggled in the past with how to present the information. We've, over like the past 3 years, have tried 3 different methods to explain the plan for purchases, where the funding's coming from, how that balances out at the end, what's raised by taxation versus reserve fund. And we just can't seem to come up with a good way to describe all of that in one easy-to-read document. Last year was completely different. I think you added extra columns and put in
Yeah.
the reserve
I-
fund
I was a
amounts.
part of that.
It was,
I caused that mess.
Well, that's kind of what I was expecting almost, is kind of like a year to year, here's the money that's coming into the fund, from the warrant or whatever, here's the purchases going out, and then here's what's left, and kind of an annual roll. I think for me, that would be easier to understand than kind of having everything commingled together, just to try to evaluate, okay, what's left, at any point, do we have needs that exceed what we think is gonna be in those funds? So, just in my opinion, that would be a little bit more helpful to try to digest the impact
Right.
of all these different items.
Yeah, I came into the process in the last meeting, so I didn't feel it was fair for me to upend all the work that had been done already.
Tip the apple cart.
Yeah.
Come on.
No, I was just gonna ride along and see what happens.
Well, and Chris may have another quick format that he might be able to provide you guys with,
Yeah.
at least to show those different pieces, so I'll ask him.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely think that it would be helpful to have a total of current year operating or warrant article, current tax year impact, as opposed to the whole thing. Next.
Well, you don't want to go into this any further? That was part of your other business, so anybody have any other business they want to address?
I just had a question about the warrant articles. What's our process for reviewing those and recommending them or not? That done after the public hearing last week, next week?
Next week. So we have the public hearing, we'll present the proposed budget. Then there's a time, during that time, there's opportunity for the public to speak, and for the selectmen or whoever, Chris Sterndale, whoever's gonna be here to answer the questions, and there's gonna be some discussion regarding some of the warrant articles and so on. And then, once the public portion has ended, we basically close the meeting to the public. And then we go about making our recommendations or whatever.
That'll be next Thursday night. And the non-money articles, the petitioned articles and things, do we make a recommendation on those as well?
No,
We don't?
because they don't have the budgetary impact, so
I was trying to remember if they were.
we did.
There have been cases where it was a little bit fuzzy whether there was some budgetary impact that wasn't, right there in black and white, that we could weigh in on just as a recommendation or not. But if it's clearly something that doesn't have obvious monetary impact, then we leave it to people that know about it.
So we just say, budget committee takes no position,
Yeah,
Yeah, like, for example, there's a petition warrant article. It's gonna be on the ballot for a rights-based ordinance for protecting the town's natural resources. It's
Yes,
not about spending taxpayer dollars, it's simply
I
about.
have information
Oh,
about
there
that,
you go.
everybody wants it.
Yep,
We're
so
mailing out tomorrow.
There's,
so.
yeah, there's no direct budgetary impact to the town, at least not until it's litigated. But, yeah, I don't think we would,
Well,
I don't
just-
think we would vote on it.
There is no recommendation from anybody,
No.
not the selectmen or.
Yeah,
the
the selectmen don't.
It's
Oh,
just,
okay.
here's the warrant article, and then that's it.
Just a little aside on that is last night the town of Plymouth voted for the rights-based ordinance to stop Northern Pass from going through their town. It passed overwhelmingly at a special town meeting, and on the same day, the site evaluation committee announced they were voting against Northern Pass 7-0. So when the towns stand up and take action, things happen for us. If we don't do anything, things happen to us. Thought for that end. It was a rare victory for we the people, so gotta celebrate it a little bit.
All right. Roundtable?
More for the folks at home than anyone else. I mean, not that anyone's interested here, but maybe you are. But tomorrow's the last day to sign up for open town positions. So, such as budget committee vacancies, selectmen openings.
Selectmen
I think we've got one seat that's being vacated.
2 people signed up for BOS.
2 now?
Good.
we need more.
Yeah. The positions, 2 people.
2 seats, 2 people, so.
Has anybody signed up for this wonderful committee?
I am.
2,
Thank you.
I have to.
2 out of the,
I got my days
5 or
mixed
6.
up.
So,
I've been at work till 7 every night this week, just about.
I'm gonna go
I'm
sign
gonna
you
call
up.
Dave and have him sign you up then.
If you can I write you a little sticky so you can write to sign my signature?
We'll have to work
She
out a
accept
power
the
of attorney
fax
document. but I'll
version?
send it.
I can totally fax it over at 3.
I'll call her tomorrow, Carrie.
Okay.
That there was miscommunication.
Yeah, I have every intention of doing it. Unfortunately, my work schedule has just been very complicated this year, so.
And you know that
hear
if you don't get signed up, then chances are we'll invite you to the first meeting. We'll trick you with treats and cookies and whatnot.
It's been
It
done
might
before.
not
And then all of a sudden
It
you're
has worked before, hasn't it?
Or everyone in this room can write Carrie's name in
Yeah.
on the ballot.
I would do
Not the
it.
3-year, not the 3-year one.
One at a
Not willing
time?
to give up,
One
you
at a
know, on the
time.
committee, but I can't commit to 3, so. but I'll be here, I'm on it, I'm here.
Good, all right.
As far as the Tuesday night hearing, not all of us have to be at that, right? Because I have a ZBA
No,
meeting.
for the school?
Yeah,
No, you don't have to be there.
And that's
We don't need a quorum
at the school.
It's
Right,
at
we're
the
just
school.
there to,
to answer for ourselves.
Yes.
represent.
Yeah. All right. Motion to,
Adjourn.
Second.
Cool.
all in favor? Thank you. See you all on, we'll see some of you on Tuesday and